Ninamani, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you all here with us today, joining us on Ghana land in person, and some of you might be joining us on Ghana land or Niranjiri land here in South Australia. You might be also joining us from other traditional lands as well. But I would just like to acknowledge where we are hosting the event in person today is on Ghana land, and I'd like to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this land. I would like to pay my respects to their communities past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge those from our indigenous communities who might be here with us today. We greatly appreciate and respect their culture and their connection to land, and the ASBN always tries to promote an ethic through our events where we as folks that might not be indigenous to land also try to take onto that ethic and see ourselves as part of this land, as part of the way that our community here continues to thrive and prosper. So just quickly, just a little bit of the ASBN, because I do see a couple of new faces. I see some regulars as well, so for those who have come back to our events after a pretty tumultuous year, that was supposed to be a chuckle, everyone. Come on, man. Man, I was trying to throw you my best stuff, my absolute best stuff, and you guys just slammed it all down. But anyway, ASBN, we are a local not-for-profit where our main aim is to spark action toward sustainable built environments. And we always host different kind of events here to be able to discuss who's doing what here in South Australia, but also how do we aim higher for our built environments and make sure that we're embedding sustainability and regenerative outcomes through our built environment. Now, the reason why we wanted to host our conversation today, which is our marketing team, so to speak, named We Declared, Now What? The reason why we want to have a conversation around that is mainly because we had questions around what actions and approaches organizations need to execute to ensure that they meet their commitment as signing up as part of these declare movements. As we know, lots of different, even councils like local and state governments, national governments, and this has trickled down to organizations in the built environment, engineering firms, architecture firms, planning firms, and even the whole of the Australian Institute of Landscape Architecture. They all declared a climate emergency. And a lot of people have signed on to do something about this. We all acknowledge we are in a tipping point, and we got to do something here. However, we need to really know what do we hold ourselves accountable to, so everyone's on a level playing field, as well as how do we, in our view, how do we make sure that we inspire each other to do better, rather than, because this is all voluntary, right? We can't mandate this action. However, we want to showcase that best practice always puts sustainability 1B to budget. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. We got one laugh. But what I'm trying to actually say is that we need to hold sustainability in a lot higher esteem. So for this event, our event will actually unfold in basically a two-part discussion. It'll be broken up into discussing aspects of the two parts of the all declare programs. Pretty much all of them advocate for this. Is that one, all signatories or businesses that sign up to the declare become carbon neutral businesses. So they have they take on a responsibility for what their environmental impact is for their business footprint. All right, so that means calculating their footprint, starting to figure out how do we actually reduce our carbon footprint, and then after that, how do we invest in offsets that align with our values? So that becomes a direct investment into programs that actually try to mitigate climate change. Now, so we're going to have a conversation about that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have a small discussion with our fantastic panel here. We're going to go into Q&A. Hopefully by then we'll figure out something about the video, but even if we're on audio only, like I said, everyone at home, just sit back and think you're on a podcast. So we'll have a break, right? And then we'll come back and then we'll talk about the second part of the Declare programs, which is embedding sustainability and regenerative design into this common practice in these firms. So right now, people see sustainability, unfortunately, as an add-on. It's like, oh, if the client really wants it, we will do it for them. How do we actually change that and say that, no, as an organization, we are going to take responsibility and embed practices, policies, and procedures to make sure that we are always delivering on our goals to ensure a sustainable built environment. And once again, short little conversation here because you need to hear their voices, and then we'll go into a little bit of a back and forth, all right? Event hashtags. If you want to participate in social media, please hashtag us at the ASBN experience, or hashtag climate action, or hashtag declare AU. Just want to introduce our panel members before we get stuck into the conversation. So right off the bat, over here, we got Jackson Digney, who is the director of Enduro Builders and probably one of two South Australian builders to have signed on to the Australian Builders Declare. So woo woo, Jackson. Which also means we want to, for all you other South Australian builders out there, let's get on this thing. But Jackson is a builder who builds energy efficient and passive house specified homes. All of his homes utilize the pillars of passive house. And through building like this, he creates a sustainable future. A major component of Jackson's work is taking clients on through the whole building journey to make sure that it's right from conceptual design to concept design to completion budget clarity, to make sure budget clarity is maintained and construction issues are identified before they become real life issues. So very hands-on and making sure that people have genuine outcomes rather than here's the keys and off you go. So welcome, Jackson. To his immediate left, we have Carrie Duffield, who is the director of Tropo Architects and is the South Australian representative of Australian Architects Declare. Carrie is the director at Tropo, and because he wrote this in his bio to me, he said he's based in Adelaide, but he's been part of Tropo since last century. Is that so? You know, if we would, yeah, just so you know. That's a monumental feat, I tell you. Tropo's national offices allow their practice to work across a range of project scales in varied locations, climates, and conditions. As part of the team at Tropo, he looks to deepen their internal understanding of environmental impacts from their projects, and also those of their clients who especially want to achieve a darker shade of green. So welcome, Carrie. And going on to the left, we have Kathy Chesson, who is the technical lead of sustainability at Mott MacDonald. And Mott MacDonald is a signatory of Australian Engineers Declare as well. And Kathy is a sustainability consultant with over 20 years of experience in sustainability and environmental impact assessment and management, and primarily in the transport infrastructure sector. Now, Kathy has led the infrastructure sustainability rating process for multiple projects on the north-south corridor in Adelaide and other major projects interstate. And Kathy is especially passionate about planning, design, and delivery that not only reduces our impacts, but also provides better outcomes for our communities. And it's fantastic to know that she is also currently leading the implementation of Mott MacDonald's carbon neutral plan here in Australia. So welcome, Kathy. And to Kathy's left, we have Michael McCune. Did I say that right?
Almost.
Almost. Michael McCune, director at Jensen Plus. And Michael is he is a leading urban designer and planner who has wide experiences across the development industry and public sector. Michael regularly leads teams to prepare master plans and designs for new communities, town centers, employment precincts, major infrastructure projects, residential neighborhoods, urban renewal areas, and main streets. So anything you could possibly think of in the built environment, essentially. And late in 2019, which sounds like, because of this year, it actually feels like yesterday. Michael was awarded Planner of the Year by the South Australia, Planner of the Year in South Australia by the Planning Institute of Australia. So, big cheese. So thank you very much for coming along, Michael. And to going down the left, we have Amanda Balmer, who is the director at Wax Design. And Amanda, as a director of Wax Design and a registered landscape architect, Amanda has extensive experience in the design and delivery of public, commercial, and residential landscape design projects. People and place are at the forefront of all of her projects, and she is skilled in the creation of, where did I mean? People and place are at the forefront of all of her projects, and she's skilled in the creation of spaces that champion communities, the environment, and most importantly, nature. Education, play, and sustainability are large components of Amanda's project portfolio, working with numerous schools, children's facilities, councils, to create learning and play environments which deliver fun, engagement, and inclusivity. So once again, everyone, please welcome our esteemed panel. And this is essentially where we get into the fun stuff, right? Now, as I said, the first part of the Declare programs is all about how do we run our businesses in the realm of built environment. And what's so great about our panel here is that we basically cover off of so many different scales and so many different considerations. But obviously, being able to take responsibility for your environmental impact isn't about how big your organization is, how small your organization is. It's everyone taking responsibility and trying to figure out how do they actually reduce their environmental impact. Now, so just to start us off, and this is for everyone in the panel to address, I'd like to ask you all, how do we encourage businesses in the built environment to measure, reduce, and then potentially offset their emissions? And within that, what do you reckon are the short and long-term actions we should require our fellow signatories to do in this space? Because we want to go from talking that we've declared to actioning it. So please, anyone, the mics are on, yes? Whoever would like to lead us off.
I can start.
Yes, do it, Jackson.
I think as a builder, we always feel like we're the ones that use the most fossil fuels. We have the most waste because we're actually moving things around and bringing people to site and bringing materials to site. And so what we're trying to do is find ways to reduce the amount of waste that's generated on site and reduce the amount of deliveries that occur to site. And that's why we're embracing prefabrication at different levels, which means in a lot of cases we're getting less deliveries to site. We're also using companies that come and collect the waste we do generate on site and recycling it so that it's at least not just going in a skip bin and going to landfill. And we're constantly trying to be careful about what products we put in front of clients so that we're always suggesting things that are sustainable and are easy to recycle at the end of their life. And if they're not easy to recycle at the end of their life currently, we're calling that out and saying, like solar panels, for instance. Solar panels are resulting in a reduced load on things like coal-powered power stations, and that's all great today, but at the moment there isn't actually a way to recycle a solar panel yet, but we're all hoping that we're going to solve that problem in the future.
Yep. Yeah, it's in the pipeline.
Yeah, that's right. So for me, it's important that it's like you said at the beginning, it's easy to be rah-rah superstar. We're going to do all this cool stuff, but as a builder, we actually have to deliver that day in, day out, and we have to organise our jobs around it and do that in a way that doesn't see the cost of building increasing.
Yeah.
And like with prefabrication, we found that initially it did cause the cost to increase, so we worked really hard, and now it is less.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, obviously your impact as a building company will come through transport as well. So like how much you guys use the transport, or also what some people might actually consider scope 3 emissions, which is like some things that you don't have all the control over, bringing like where do these materials actually come from, who's actually bringing them to you on site.
Yeah.
That always has a big impact. So it's great to hear that there's opportunities to actually really look through that through procurement as well as a business practice.
Yeah, that's right. And it also, like, a great example is trucking. We truck a lot of stuff around, and one of the first things we have to do on a project is, on a new home, we've got to get the site prepared, and that usually either means taking fill away or bringing fill in.
Yep.
And there is the cheap, straightforward way, and then there's the cheap, slightly complicated way. So the cheap, straightforward way is you're in the quarry and you get it delivered if you need fill. The still cheap but slightly more complicated way is ringing all the local pool companies and saying, are you doing any dig outs in the next 2 weeks, because we need 300 tonne of fill.
Yeah, cool.
And so that means that those trucks might only be driving 15 minutes instead of half an hour between loads. So, and I think that for me, what I've learned is that, like, by the inch it's a cinch. So if you focus on all those little things, that's 15 minutes less that truck drove to bring a load of something to site, or whatever the case may be. All those little things add up.
Yep. Thank you so much, Jackson. Kathy, I just wanted to bring you in because, I think what's really interesting is that Jackson has highlighted that builders would have a large imprint and stuff like that. But as an organizational kind of thing, you work in massive infrastructure, and you must be, especially Mott MacDonald being such a global company there, in terms of like business practices, what kind of things did you guys really have to think about? Because Jackson's on a very local level, but you guys are playing at a global sort of level.
Yeah, I think that was really interesting. And when you say about all this, fuel use and whatever on your site, I think it something like, I can talk certainly about projects and working out where your impacts are. But from a company perspective, Mott's have been tracking carbon for our workplace since 2012, which is pretty cool. It's got better lately, which is good. I think one of the key things that we found that you can just assume where you think your carbon footprint is, but until you actually go and map it. Ours has changed quite significantly since 2012 to now, and we've moved from most of our carbon coming from our buildings to most of our carbon coming from flights and travel. So as a consulting firm, we have people that sit in offices, but we also have a lot of people that fly around the place, and we have a lot of people that think they're really important and need to go to board meetings, like all in the UK or all of our region in Singapore. So yeah, they're my favourite ones I'm going to get stuck into this year. So I think doing your footprinting is really important, and that can really influence what you work on and target.
And Mont McDonald has recently become carbon neutral globally. So
Yes,
that
that's
must have been
correct.
an enormous undertaking.
It was huge. And I think one of my favourite stories about this is that when our global sustainability lead went in to talk to the big boss and said, right, we've got this plan for 3 years and we want to go carbon neutral. He goes, well, why can't we just do it now? And so everyone just went, oh, okay. So it would have been really cool to be a fly on the wall at that, I think. So over time, we have been reducing our footprint. So business has gone up, revenue's gone up, and like in Australia, we've only been in Australia for 10 years. So when I started 7 years ago, we had about 30 people in the Adelaide office, and now we have 670 in Australia. So we're still getting our carbon going down globally despite increasing, which is pretty cool. But I think that commitment to going carbon neutral pretty much straight away has meant that we have done offsets now without... with definitely a plan on what to do around reductions, but it was like, well, if we wait until we do reductions, then that will take time. So we want to do it now. So
Yeah, and then it becomes your journey, kind of
Yes.
going forward.
yeah,
Awesome.
So there's quite a few things.
Oh, fantastic.
Yep.
Do you mind passing the mic just down to Michael, because you're an SA-based company, however, do work all over the country and things like that. So
Yeah.
as a even South Australian based, but kind of like works nationally, how does being responsible for your carbon footprint look like for you, or at Jensen Plus? Sorry.
Well, I think the good news is that in small business land for a consultancy, it's actually really easy, and because the two big things that we need to deal with are our energy use and our flights, and really that's nothing more than making a phone call to our energy provider and signing up for 100% green energy, and then telling my office manager colleague to make sure we buy the offsets and all the flights that we're taking, and there's not been many of them in the last 6 months.
Yep. We're learning not to do them.
Yeah, that's right. And then the rest of our emissions are really small change, and we're pretty close to getting our kind of carbon neutral package registration together. And but the other thing is that it's taking the staff and the team with you on the journey, and fortunately this is something that everyone in our small team are really enthusiastic about. And I think thinking of the opportunities and the reasons why other businesses should take these steps, it is something that staff, especially younger people, but not exclusively, are really quite keen on. So it's a great thing to do to build a team that are enthusiastic. And I think it's a really good marketing opportunity as well to promote a small business as a kind of sustainable business, and that we are walking the walk. It's much harder to maybe apply these principles to all of our projects, and we'll probably come to that in the next question. But I think for just dealing with our own practices and our own emissions, it's a relatively easy thing for a small business to do, which is a great thing to know.
Knowing that now, does that surprise you from where you first started, like, we got to go carbon neutral? Is it surprising that you're saying it's easy now?
No, because I remember 15 years ago being in a group in Brisbane called Carbon Counters, and we did all this and signed up to green energy, all those things, but other stuff get in the way. And so it's really just reminding ourselves and taking the step. And you know, it's a project amongst 100 other projects, an internal project, and so you just got to commit to it. So I knew how relatively straightforward it would be, and probably the criticism was just not doing it quick enough.
Yep, that's okay. We forgive you.
Thank you.
No, just kidding. Could we get Amanda in for a second, because you know, I think you have a small team as well, and I know from personal experience your team is very enthusiastic about the environment, as yourself is. So not only about how you think businesses should hold each other accountable, but maybe also play off of what Michael was saying, is that it really it creates enthusiasm in the office.
It does, and I fully endorse what you were saying, Michael, is that we sit down with our staff and we talk with them about what's important. And so collectively, the 7 of us make decisions about what we're doing in our practice and in our projects. But you're in a fortunate position, Ken, is that Ken knows the rest of our team quite well because Ken's office is upstairs. So he has seen firsthand how enthusiastic we are about the environment, our work environment, but also our project environment. But what's special about having a small building and a small business within a small building is that as a collective, there is actually strength in our businesses when we collaborate together. And so working with Sarah, and only the other day, Sarah came down and we had a whole building drink session on recycling. What's our building doing with recycling? And so we actually had a workshop and had some drinks. We've partnered together with D Squared and put solar panels on the building together, not as an individual business, but as a collective. So I think it's not just about I can stand here and champion how well we're doing, but how is it that you can initiate the collective within your local community? So is that your community within your building or even within your neighbourhood? And the conversation spilled over with Sarah the other night. Okay, as a building, what are we doing for recycling? But as a neighbourhood, how are we influencing the people next door or in the local restaurant? And when we go and buy our lunches, we're all taking plates. Just some of that stuff. But how is it that you can, almost be viral and influenced by your actions?
Yep. Thank you so much, Amanda. Yeah, totally agree. We do need to bring a lot more people along on this journey, and we can do that through, once again, inspiring each other, encouraging each other. And also means that Grieve Gillette Anderson at 243 Peary Street, right next to us, we come in for you. You're in the you're in the neighborhood. I'm sorry, you guys are in the firing line. If any of y'all are on the call. Sorry, but thank you so much, Amanda. Carrie, now we've talked about transport, thinking about how do we actually think about offsets and global firms as well as local firms collaboration. Now, for yourselves as Tropo, you guys have been sort of champions of sustainability within architecture for sure. You guys are very much a standout in terms of like an Australian icon in that space. However, you guys are still on this journey of how do we, as a business, start to embed all of our ethics into how do we run our organization. So I'm wondering if, what made you guys want to jump on the Declare train, but also what kind of conversations has that catalyzed as a business for you guys at Tropo?
Thanks, Ken. I guess we wanted to get on board because I guess that standing, we're fortunate we've had that reputation, I guess. In the early days, it was pretty easy to do that. It was just, if you're in Darwin, you don't want to live in a concrete box, and therefore you revolt against air conditioning. It's a pretty big start. So, so I guess, we wanted to get on board because we were asked to be a signatory, but we've still got plenty of things we can do. Like these guys, it's not that hard when you're small. You get your electricity, you go green. Then what's the next thing? Flights. That's not so much of a problem, but we do have a lot of travel between the office in Adelaide and Darwin and one in Sydney, but there's always, there's different things in different projects, sometimes overseas. So we, offset straight away. I know, but that hasn't been a defined policy previously, so it's a matter about getting people to do that, and that cuts out most of those things. But then, it works down to all the other things we're talking about. We've got 3-bin system, but we're not weighing it. Banning bottles, drinking from cans, when you're having Friday drinks, in theory, as long as it's recycled aluminium, all those type of things. It's just how green and how hard you can go, I guess. And then bringing that to the table with the office, like everyone else has said, we're pretty lucky. I think there's 15 of us across the board in Adelaide, and there's probably only 3 people that drive on a regular basis due to geographic and time and all that sort of thing. So it's not too bad. Most people are pretty keen and do it for, some of it too tight to pay for a bus fare. Others, are probably trying to do the right thing. So, it works around that way. But we're putting working together, an action plan, carbon audits, all that stuff in place as well to make sure that, despite being that, we're a bit behind the 8 ball from where we should be, but it'll get there, and it's not that hard to do it. Just get on and do it, I guess.
We forgive you as well.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. I think you brought up a really important part, and I'm pretty sure, Kathy, I'm sure you also brought this up as well. But you talked about like the measurement components. Like a lot of us might be doing things, however, we were not actually measuring it. And once you measure it, it can actually start to change the way you approach the problem. Like for yourself, Michael, you guys, my understanding is that you guys have already done a carbon account, so you actually know what are your top 2 emissions. Do we actually know? You might actually think it's, commuting, but maybe it's not. So doing those kind of measurements is so powerful in terms of how you communicate business structure as well as business KPIs and all that other kind of stuff. So thank you to you all for setting the table with that kind of discussion. Harsha, if I could just please get your assistance. Is anyone keen to ask a question to the panel from our audience? If not, we can take one from Zoom. All right, so we'll go to Zoom first, but if anyone wants to ask a question, please let me know.
Okay, so this is from Olivia. I love the concept of making sustainability and regenerative design more common practice when offering services to organisations. I'd like to know how you'd suggest making those things common practice within communities. Many local governments have declared a climate emergency, but how do you think they have a significant impact on residents in their homes?
Okay, right on. So how can some of our learnings as running businesses can also help us advocate for our communities? Do any of you have a idea on that? Yep. Michael, please, go ahead.
I think there is a general point to discuss about, where we're going to get leadership from, because I think often we're looking to governments, whether local or state or federal, to tell us what to do. But actually, I think sometimes that's lacking, and leadership might come from other places, from individuals or from businesses or from community groups. I guess there can always be a bit of a kind of carrot and a stick approach. There can be incentives and programs, and there's been lots of things in the past. But maybe to pick up on the previous points, where are the biggest impacts? Where is the best result? Is it from people's energy use, or changing behaviour around travel is a really difficult one, of course. And having conversations with people around their flights. And I remember, years ago, one of my friends, and he had the jet skis and the V8 car and all that sort of stuff. But then I flew to Scotland once a year, maybe. And so my carbon emissions were always worse than his, even though he was noisy and polluting. So it's quite a difficult conversation to have with a lot of people, I think. Probably having more fun. Yeah, maybe.
Does anyone else on the panel kind of have an idea around how do we actually galvanize, through potentially changing our own practices in our buildings, we also change community sort of like around us, whether it's our community of colleagues or communities of even our personal lives and things of that nature? Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
We work a lot with communities, and I think one of the most important things is finding that champion or that advocate in the community to support the project, and I suppose, and then find that voice. But part of what we've found over the years is before we even start sitting down and having that conversation with the community that we're about to work with, what is it that they have as far as their assets go within the project that we should be recycling or maintaining or actually championing further than they currently are? Are we looking at things like heat island mapping? What amount of beauty sits within their place? What is the culture and community? Because sustainability just isn't physical things. It's also how we feel about a space, whether we like to use it currently or not. So what are those key assets that before we go in and actually start changing things, how is it that we're evaluating what is there that we should be keeping as a resource? Is it water? Is it soil? Is it our trees? Is it the way the community currently uses a space? And actually spending some time to evaluate what's important before we start changing things, because that is the most wasteful thing at all, is to take something out that's actually working, because from a designer perspective, it doesn't look so good, or maybe we think we could be doing it better. Yeah. So perhaps tampering our egos slightly, and listening to those people that are going to be using those spaces before we even start.
Yeah. And I'd like to make a quick translation even through running businesses and things like that. It's also good to take stock of, what works for us, what are our values, how do we embed that throughout, even if that has a connection with, carbon footprint, but also be honest with each other and be like, I know it's important, however, going somewhere in your V8 or your high-powered car might not be the best thing, and let's change that. Like, we also have to be honest in terms of those kind of conversations, because sometimes we're entrenched in our social norms that we never really question and measure. What is this impact on our climate and our future generations? Now, we had a question over here with Heather.
Thanks, Ken. Anyone in this room over 40 probably remembers the era of Local Agenda 21 and Cities for Climate Protection. My reflection on the fact that councils all had systematised climate action back in that early 2000s era, and what's happening with climate declarations now is that now they are marketing heavy and accountability light. So I wonder if the panel could reflect on how we make sure we just don't get, convinced by the fake news of declarations and we actually see some action.
Get in, but also want Kathy in on this one as well.
I really resonate with what you said about, like, it's easy, like I said earlier, to be rah-rah superstar, this is all fantastic, everyone's declaring. Well, and I'm on this end of the scale of how's that actually going to work? Like, who's going to do what? What's going to go where? Who's going to be where they need to be? What needs to actually change? What's going to stop being delivered? And what needs to start being delivered? And then, of course, I totally agree with, it's just like all basic business principles is what gets measured, gets managed. And when you were talking earlier about how you were measuring what you were doing, my mind was ticking over, like, how can I implement that in my business in a way that doesn't further add to our workload?
Very important question. Very important question.
But so that, because everyone that works with us knows that I'm really big on, well, like, show me the facts. Like, if someone comes in and says, oh, we should use this great product, like, show me the data, show me the detail. Does it actually do what you said it will do? And I think that's exactly the same with dealing with these issues of climate change, is that having something measurable, but I think making the system for actually measuring it accessible is probably something that I think is really lacking, and it's probably only dawned on me tonight that that's actually an issue.
Kathy, can I bring you in on that as well? Not only because you sparked a fantastic, thought bubble in Jackson, but you guys are sort of like implementing things, or in the process of implementing things. So
I think a couple of things there. I'm really conscious that we need to have something that we're measuring against, and there've been a lot of these things. We're going to be carbon neutral by, and talking to my UK colleagues, they're working on like roadmaps to how to get to this carbon neutrality. It's going to mean we need to reduce, transport emissions by this much or whatever. And I really find that that's lacking in South Australia from a government policy level at the moment. It doesn't translate down to our projects in terms of on this job you need to make sure that your materials are reduced by this amount. So I think that's something that we need to make sure that when we say these things, we say them with actually what we're going to try and reduce to. And yes, the measurement thing, I think you can take that to all sorts of levels about how, whether you do a sample of, a project or two and look at that and then go, oh, this is probably an average job for us. because I've certainly seen us go, the pendulum swing from one side to the other about how much data that we collect on projects and try and, work out, well, what's our most important, emissions to reduce, to, oh no, let's just look at initiatives, what are we going to do with those? But yeah, we don't want to end up with a list of doing things that sound good, but aren't impactful.
So is that sort of like an action point, so to speak, for our fellow signatories, on any kind of declares? And actually, a lot of the declare programs actually advocate for this. Do an audit, do a carbon audit, do a carbon inventory. Is that something that we should, if anyone's actually on the websites on the declare, we should actually be like, when are you actually going to do that audit? Like, should we put a timeline to that? Like, what do y'all reckon? I see a lot of nodding heads, but it's like, should we say 3 months, get it done? Like you said, Michael, it's as long as you commit to it, it's not that hard. But then you gotta, when are we gonna ask everyone to just be like, sorry for my language, but fuck it. Like, you got to get that audit or that carbon inventory. Do it. Like, when should we do? I'm sorry, I'm pressing it. I'm just wondering from we are all colleagues in the built environment, so a little bit of this is sort of like, well, come on, y'all, we can do this. Like, I'm going to give you 3 months.
The Access Declare haven't set a checklist for checking off members. It's been discussed as to how we do that. I mean, I guess it's seen as a tool to provide those tools that enable people to do the process and get through that. Whether you're going to start clamping down on membership, there's already lots of examples where people could be doing better or doing not good things, but no one's perfect,
Exactly.
So you don't throw stones in the glass house. So, but I guess it's, what are we doing? I guess at least we're forming a group, a collective for agitating governments and policy, and I think that's where a lot of things come from. We get involved in projects where we get slung because we're involved in them. We're delivering a service. You can pick your ethics. Do you want to work for a mining company because you can make a difference, or do you want to say, hey, I'm not going there at all, but everyone hand their mobile phone into the door, that's got minerals in it, and rare stuff. So I think you've got to get together as a group, use that as a vehicle for change and push people on policy, state, federal, the whole lot. It's the only way that things start to change, and then obviously that sets parameters which then you can measure yourself against. As I say, sit back and do nothing, but like I say, if you measure it, you know what you're doing, set yourself a goal and just go lower and then go lower and go lower as much as you can, I guess. But it's going to be tough to get everyone on board because everyone will be on different things. So,
for sure.
And I guess until clients start, we can advocate to clients. I mean, we try and push them.
We'll go on that. Once again, are y'all ready for part 2? That's what I'm talking about. That's the energy we need. So keep that same energy as you are. So I felt the momentum building. We were about to go in a real nice space right there, and then I had to shut it down, so I'm very sorry. But it's because we're on to part 2, and of course that's the second component of the Declare program. And one thing is all about businesses. How do we make sure that we have the responsibility of our businesses, practices, and policies? But also, the built environment creates so much that actually it really, how can you kind of say this? It's basically facilitates our communities. It facilitates the way that we live. It facilitates the way that we interact with each other, the way that we interact with the environment. So the built environment has a huge impact not only on the physical ecology, ecological systems of our world, but it also has a big impact on us, psychologically and all that other good stuff. Beautiful chimes in the background. Now, the second question, so just to, kick off our second part, something that I want to bring you, get all of your perspective is around what are the ways in which organizations can embed high performance or regenerative outcomes as the status quo, like what we do regularly, and from that go beyond minimum compliance, because that is really our current status quo, and we know that that has a extremely detrimental impact on our natural environment as well as our own human health. So what are active company policies or requirements or procedures in the built environment which will help deliver climate responsive built environments all across the board? So those environments can help support human and ecological health and well-being. So it is a very loaded question, but it's not necessarily what materials or what kind of star rating or anything like that we go for. I want to challenge you all to think about what are the company procedures to make sure its outcome, because as you bring in new staff and stuff like that, they need to know that they have to hit this kind of standard, these kind of benchmarks, and what is to making sure that it's part of your regular delivery process as champions in the built environment. Whoever wants to go first, the mics are live.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Not be that hard. Even if I mess it up, it doesn't matter.
Y'all can use that one.
So, yes, we're experts in our own field, but I find that working in a silo, it doesn't get us anywhere. So if we're going to start a new project, it's to try and sit down with the entire team. So typically we're working with architects and engineers. How is it that we can sit down together and actually work out how, with all our inherent knowledge, we can get the best outcome for the project? So if I sit down with our engineers and sort of talk, okay, stormwater, you want to get rid of it, I know that. But how is it that actually we can redirect it into my landscape, and then that way I'm going to reduce the ongoing costs for my client, and then we can actually take that information back to the client. And actually challenge and push ourselves and sort of say to each other as a team, are we doing best practice, or are we being lazy and this is easy, or this is what we've always done? And so if, as a collective, we can work together, because otherwise I know as a professional, I feel like I'm just bashing my head against the wall half the time because no one's listening. And it's like, well, why is no one listening? It's because I haven't sat down and given the opportunity to talk to each other about how we could all benefit collectively through the knowledge that we've got to get about better outcome for our client.
Yeah, so it's all internal collaboration as well as potentially external collaboration, correct? The conversations.
I was going to say too.
And extending to the builder, of course.
Yeah. So that was what had me picking the microphone up. I was like, early contractor involvement. It's I think that something that I've learned as I've embraced Passive House is the importance of even all of the architects that I've met that are Passive House designers and consultants. They have all, from my perspective, seen the light of the benefits of early contractor involvement, because having us at the table in those discussions, we can also say, oh, well, you could do it that way, but if we can make it work in a slightly different format, it's going to save you, depending on the scale of the project, $10,000, $100,000, whatever it is. And that ultimately results in a better outcome overall. The other thing too is, like Ken touched on clients very briefly, and the first thing that I thought about is marketing. And I know marketing is sometimes a bit of a dirty word, but I find...
Got to get better at it.
Yeah, and I find that good marketing is done by educating the people watching it. So and a lot of clients that we meet, in particular on Passive House, they are really misinformed, and that kind of is also goes across to things around climate change. I find that a lot of clients that I talk to, and I'm certainly no expert on that, but even the stuff that I know to be the correct path to follow is often lost in a sea of really bad marketing. And so trying to make sure that if you're in that space and you know what you're talking about, you've got to make the time to put that out to people so that the mass market is able to see and learn about what it is that we're trying to achieve in those closed door meetings where we're talking about, a closed door to the public, where we're talking about how to actually pull a project together and tick all of those boxes.
That's a really interesting thing because, Amanda, you're talking about, collaboration, don't work in silos, make sure that we're communicating through everyone across the board. This is even a panel of all the different stages potentially that a project could actually go through, so making sure you have early contractor engagement. But it's also interesting that it's also about how you engage your potential clients, because potentially it's not only how you help them, but also what attracts them to you. So, Michael, I know you want to, it seems, I could see your face, you want to jump in here about something, but yeah.
I think it's much more difficult, I think, to achieve really good sustainability outcomes with clients sometimes. And at the other end of the spectrum, where you're maybe working on a big project, a long-term master planning project, economic development, you might be working with a government department or 3 government departments, and they can't decide when to have lunch, never mind what the sustainability framework might be. And one of the frustrating things is when you speak with everyone individually, they might actually be really quite committed to having great sustainability outcomes, but somehow the project is this kind of behemoth that's just kind of blundering down the road in this sort of normal direction, and it's very hard to kind of push it in a different path. And I don't really have the answer here, and we put forward the best solutions we can, and we advocate, and we try to write the vision and the strategies and the solutions. But there's no easy fix. And whereas I said it was quite easy for a small business to say become carbon neutral, I think it's much harder to influence big projects that are running for many years, and no one is really in charge. These big infrastructure projects, they're just kind of happening, and they pass through many hands along the way.
Yep.
It's not as if there's one person at the top who's kind of pulling all the strings. There's just momentum that kind of takes these things forward, and it's really difficult to make substantial change. So we might talk about a road project, and you can have really good bike paths, and you can treat the stormwater better, and you might do something with the energy, but at the end of the day, it's still a road project, right? So it's a bit of lipstick on the pig sometimes. And so we can influence whenever we can, and we can try to always advocate for the best outcomes, but we don't have total control over where these projects are going.
So interestingly, we probably need project manager declare. Well, it's just in terms of like who's guiding the project, because I think that's also really interesting, because especially if projects change hands, people have different value sets, understanding of sustainability, and we also know even internally in organizations, unless you have a champion always pushing something, that vision doesn't get seen all the way through. So, in terms of the people that work in the built environment, does that mean you have to have even a lot more training in or strengthening your muscle of, it's not determination, but because we're all human, we'll lose enthusiasm. But Kathy, kind of.
And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we face, is about if we've got a client that doesn't necessarily have a clear goal around their sustainability outcomes. And so getting involved in things earlier in projects, and I know you work in planning, so I was going to say, but I do a fair bit of work with ISCA, the Infrastructure Sustainability Rating, and one of the things that they were rewarding was around options assessment and doing things that might include no infrastructure being built. And I was like, oh, that's just like the Holy Grail. But I heard of an example within the Department of Transport where trying to facilitate extra public transport passage into the city, and just the way that the contracts for the buses had been laid out meant that there was one part of a community that wasn't actually getting bus access, and so the solution, and there were lots of cars from that area at one of the interchanges, and the outcome for that was, or the solution to that was just to change the contract just to change the contract boundaries and, got a much better public transport outcome. Didn't have to build another multi-storey car park or, put on more buses. So, yeah, things like that. Thinking outside the box in those planning studies as well. It doesn't always mean more infrastructure.
Yep. So it's almost like sometimes it's also interesting because what you're saying about that is, sometimes the most optimal solution just needs a little bit more time to figure out, or that collaboration conversations to actually have that happen.
Sure.
I think as well, sometimes in our work there's a lot of trade-offs. So you might be trying to take road transport, reduce road freight, but you're putting it onto rail, and you might have to build a new rail connection and a massive intermodal terminal, and that has impacts locally. So you're actually trading off one impact for another, and it's like maybe there's a net benefit that you're aiming for, and it's possible for us to calculate that and to describe that, but it's a pretty hard thing to get your head around because the real world is pretty complicated and imperfect.
Yeah.
That's where we work.
Yeah, and acknowledging that, even in the built environment, we will always be imperfect, just like ourselves as humans, but we can always strive to get better as well. Carrie, now, we're talking about how do we actually make sure that it's, sustainability is status quo. My understanding of Tropo is, you guys have an underlining almost like ethic to how you guys design buildings and things of that nature. I'm almost going to go on a limb and say that if someone that is coming into your organization doesn't even want to think about sustainability, they might actually get the boot. They won't stay around that long.
Clients or staff?
Staff.
Oh, we're not that hard.
But then, because Tropo's so known for that ethic, is it something that's difficult for you guys to make sure there's an understanding across your staff that we are going to look for our avenues or opportunities for sustainability, or will that always change depending on how far the client wants to go?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's how far the client wants to go, how far you can push back on them. I mean, we've got, I guess, it's sort of, I guess we, acknowledge the passive house approach, I guess, but I guess we also come from the fact that people's comfort levels vary and everyone's different. I mean, I'm sure some people have slept in a bed with someone who's got the fan on and the blankets off and the blankets on and all these type of things. It's just that everyone's so different in the thing. So that's not to say that's a cop-out, but it's very, the variable nature of buildings and stuff.
Yep.
So you extend people's comfort range. But trying to get those design parameters in place as we go through, I guess most people in the office have an understanding. I guess it gets embedded through observation and things. There's no doctrine; it's more a bit of the vibe. The Pirate's Handbook. It's a bit of a guide type thing. So, we work with that and try and make sure that we take as many opportunities as we can, push back on clients with certain things. Dollars, like Jackson was saying, is square metres. Every square metre costs $1.
Yeah.
But clients always want a bit more, and to say to a client, the best thing you do is do nothing and do yourself out a job, which isn't going to happen. They're always going to do something.
Yeah.
But trying to pare it back, I guess, to minimise the impact, because like we're saying, with the best road's no road, probably. So, but the reality is we're never going to do that. And it's interesting, just like you're saying about built environment's such a big part of it. Immigration's 180,000 a year. That's what's been driving our economy. That drops off. Without that need for housing, what does the construction industry do? How does that evolve? And then how do we turn back on ourselves, I guess? And it's great to build a 100, 200-year monument building, but what does it mean in 100 years or 200 years? Is it actually relevant?
Going too philosophical now for me, Kerry.
Yeah, I know. But there's all those things as to how hard do you make things for for things, and how far ahead you can plan for what is an unknown type thing. So the least you can do is the best, obviously, and then the least impact, the less the shallower hole you dig, the better, so to speak.
Thank you so much for all of your perspective on that bit. I will say that y'all actually didn't give me what's a single policy in our companies that we can hold people to. However, I'll get back to that before we leave tonight, because we're trying to get some answers here. Isn't that right, Zoom? Yes? Yeah. Meredith, in the front, you were raising your hand. I was wondering if we can give you a mic for a question. But then we'll open up to the crowd, and Sarah, let me know if anyone's asking questions on Zoom.
Well, earlier on, I was just sort of wondering about a couple of things that were just sort of sparked by the conversation, and one was the idea of shifting stuff around, and very simple sort of concept, but cut and fill as a sort of concept, and projects that look to retain materials in place as much as possible. And so that's more of a comment really than a question, I suppose. I chatted with Kathy about it a bit in our break, and thought Jackson might have some views about it too.
Yeah.
And the other one I was really wondering about, particularly with, again, sort of infrastructure projects and builders, is how trades fit in, or subcontractors, because you can declare and do a whole lot with your organisation. There seems, I live near South Road, and there's an awful lot of people driving around from crack of dawn till, midnight.
Yeah. Sorry, Meredith, we're going to need the question.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
well,
trades.
that's more
Trades.
Of a comment.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
more of a comment.
But would anyone like to address Meredith's comments? Thank you so much for the question as well.
The reason that I led off with talking about cut and fill is just because it's top of mind, because we're working one out at the moment. But it's if you rewind it a little bit, whenever we're involved with the design, we're trying to, by minimising that sort of stuff, you minimise costs. So if we're involved with the design, we will always talk through with the architect about site levels and what we could do and what they reckon and what they want and how that'll impact different parts of it. When it comes to trades, I was actually talking with Kerry before we started. He was asking me about my trades, and I have taken the road that a lot of custom builders do, is that I've tried to find the most economical way to build a really sustainable house, and that the road that I've taken to do that is to work really closely with a core team of trades, and that way they learn about how we do things, and they work to my quality standard, and in turn we find all the little savings in how we do things. So when it comes to trying to deliver these sorts of changes to how we do things so that we reduce our carbon footprint, it's certainly a lot easier because you have that rapport with the trades. When you don't have that rapport with the trades, I think that's where, as builders, we need to come up with a better framework, and that's why I was kind of piqued my interest when we were talking about measuring and having a way to actually monitor how the trades are delivering their work to us, that can be applied across a range of projects. So does that kind of cover it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome insight. Does anyone? Yeah, okay.
I just, from an architectural point of view, and I guess some of the other disciplines, is about specifying stuff. If you specify stuff, that's what you want, that's what you should get. And then it's a matter of, is that the right stuff, is it the best stuff? And builders bring stuff to the table for us all the time that, here's something we can use. You just got to vet it and make sure it's the right stuff, because you're never going to know everything. So you just got to impart your knowledge as best you can and be prepared to be proven wrong or move forward and change things as you go. So that's how you get what you need.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you bring up as well, Kerry, through like the specification. So I'll get to you as well, Amanda. But it's sort of like maybe every organization needs to make sure that they have, a spec that they don't actually down spec from. Not sure. Like these are the conversations that we actually need to have, because, if it does actually mean we have to lock things in through the specifications, which becomes a legal document, then maybe that's the stuff that we need to hold each other accountable to.
But that's the comment that I was also going to allude to, is as professionals specifying materials, is we can spend a lot of time researching what is the most sustainable, whatever it is that we're looking at. That could be something for your list, Ken, is a more accessible information list for materials that we can source locally, obviously starting here, or Australia-wide if we have to go that far, And I think COVID's been wonderful in encouraging us to be more resourceful about where we find things locally. But if we then had a resource that was easier, like we have Outdoor Design Source, or we have magazines, but nothing is really a list that's accessible for practitioners as a handy check guide.
Yeah, so everyone doesn't have to come up with their own thing. Once again, go into your collaboration like a group think sort of thing. So resource, sorry, not think, but an actual resource, so we can all benefit from that. So, sorry, John, you also had, I think you had, you mentioned to me that you want to either make a comment or a question?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment that I'd like to have people perhaps thinking beyond declare it to perhaps demonstrate it. And if we, I think back in 1991, the owner of a company, Interface Floor, that makes carpet tiles like this, we've got here, was talking to Al Gore and was totally convinced, and he's the owner of the company. He went ahead and every time he put up his hand saying, oh, we're doing things more environmentally, the share price would drop 2 or 3 cents, and so he'd just shut up and they just did it. Did what they were doing. But what they did was, the approach they took was they're saying every year on such and such a measure, let's say electricity, let's say nitrogen was one of them, I think, water, and a whole pile of other things, we're going to reduce by 10%, and as a strategy overall. And so Interface Floor, with their websites, and this is going back probably a decade because this has sort of suddenly been thrust on me tonight, so I haven't looked at it, but what they used to do is you could look at Brazil or Australia and find out how they've been doing in terms of, let's say, electricity usage over so many years, because you go to their website, you could pop it up and see a graph going there. Some years it may actually go up due to various things happening, but they demonstrated what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really good principle to say, well, let's pick the low-hanging fruit first and say 10% per annum of last year's, and that means that as time goes on, it's going to become more difficult to get to it.
Thanks.
But, the approach that, I don't know whether they've still on their websites, they've still got it, but it was possible to look up, Brazil. It's a question of being able to demonstrate on several fronts what you're actually doing.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate the insight, and then that also sparks a lot of interesting thoughts around, does that mean we were talking about benchmarking our own businesses, like their own carbon footprint, but what do y'all think about actually organizations starting to benchmark their, it could be energy efficiency, water efficiency, embodied energy, like how can we embed that in terms of how we design projects, because we want, we don't have to be perfect, right? We don't have to get everything right, but then if we can say like, okay, this is our benchmark internally, how can we start to lower that a little bit, because a lot of times we don't care about operational energy and stuff like that. Michael?
Yeah, the comment I was going to make, and it's we talked about leadership before, and I think there's a question for us to think about following the money at the moment. So there's a chap who this week successfully sued his super fund to provide more information about their responsibilities around environment. And many of us probably invest in the coal industry through our super funds, for example. And so we talk about the next step for a declare movement. What are the money men and the super funds doing around that, and what are we doing to write to our money managers and saying, well, hang on a minute, I don't want you to put my money into certain things. And also last week, I live in the city of Unley, and I think the council there declined to declare a climate emergency after a big debate, and there was loads of people there. My children were there, and they were kind of overwhelmed with interest, but yet the councillors decided not to do that. But I believe they're looking to do, in their view, more practical measures. And so, there's a question about whether it's about declaring or doing, I suppose. And but I think we need to think about, follow the money. It's not just about government decisions. It's about what's happening to our resources and what are the decisions being made on our behalf with our money.
And I mean, even for that standpoint, what are projects investing in? So you were talking about interface. So, not only are you thinking about like performance or different standards you have to meet in the built environment, but if we can, and this goes back to the specs, like specifications that we actually create for buildings or cities or landscapes, it's, like what are the companies and manufacturers that we are actually investing in? Do we have to really think about, and this goes into your list, Amanda, is like how are we investing in organizations that don't only have a circular economy framework, a biodiversity kind of trade-off scheme, all these different companies that want to separate themselves from their competitors as a premium, not only a premium, but a good quality product. And make sure that, we're investing in those companies and empowering them over organizations that are just saying, fuck it. I had a fantastic thought, and I think I just lost it after saying that bit. But before we get to your question, Andreas, sorry. Once again, we're all family here, so even though you don't think I know your name, I know your name. I just wanted to ask really quickly because I love sport, so. I used to be, before I zenned out, I used to be incredibly competitive. So I always wanted to chase the people that I felt were doing better than me. And that kind of goes back to benchmarking and making it public. What's interesting is that, huge developers or anything like that actually have investors, they have to disclose in terms of their sustainability reports and all that kind of stuff. Like, why aren't we making sure that all signatories also disclose their carbon footprint per employee or embodied energy per project? I understand it's like a scale kind of thing, but we might not get even GDP as a metric isn't perfect, right? So can we come up with actually a metric that all of a sudden we can benchmark each other against? And once again, not necessarily saying like, man, you can't squat 60K or something like that. It's more of like, hey, this is what your other colleagues are doing. You have an opportunity if you put in the work to actually get to this point. You can actually lift. You can do heavy lifting in the realm of climate change and sustainability as long as you get there. So I was wondering if I could, Kathy, I don't know if you might be able to, what do you think of that? Like working for a global company, wouldn't it be awesome to be like, Mont McDonald, we're carbon neutral, and we're benchmarking our projects, and we're way better than all y'all?
I think that would be great. I saw some benchmarking that was done. We've got science-based targets for reduction as well, and it was looking at other big multinationals, and they all had, different things that they'd committed to doing, but there's not really any way to compare it. So, yeah, it sounds like a pretty cool idea. I think
who's going to fund it?
Well, I mean, if it's about yourself, if it's about your company, well, you should be doing it. I think also that the FTE thing's a bit interesting too, because as companies grow, even if your per individual footprint's going down, you're still if you're still going up overall, then that's not a cool thing either.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Do you want a ranking system in South Australia, Kerry?
Don't know, it might be in the bottom end. We did flag at our last meeting about whether we just go for a green, amber, red thing initially, just people, people lodging their stuff so they can see where they are without fully shaming them to start with, but gradually working into a more, specific assessment of people. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's the way to measure where you're at and see where you're at, and it's a competition thing. So people try harder if you're not at the top, I guess, possibly.
Yeah.
So
got to figure that one out.
Thanks.
Question.
I spend all day spelling it for people. Michael raised an interesting point, which I think drags us into the moral and ethical dilemmas associated with a lot of the discussions in this space, and it seems to me that everyone on the panel's, very in tune with that. And I'd really be interested to know how you deal with what you just threw as a line in, which is sustainability as it relates to water. It takes 5 litres of water almost to make 1 litre of wine. It takes 35 litres of water to make 1 litre of scotch. So are we going to suddenly turn our offices into teetotal environments? You don't come to an ASBN meeting and have a slab of steak hanging on the wall or a pig on a barbecue. Okay. Troppo's fantastic at vegetarian and vegan food, which is why I keep spending money there. How do we interface the professional life and the professional reach with what actually goes on in our offices, what we serve in our kitchens? I mean, where is the line for all of these issues?
Yeah.
And sometimes I ask myself, are we kidding ourselves? Because these are matters of judgment. And I'd be very surprised if when, I think you said before, we all get together for drinks and talk about what we can do. Well, what are we drinking? Are we drinking something that we could have 5 litres of water for 1 litre of wine?
Yeah.
You know, like, how does one reconcile?
This is a great question. So thank you very much, because it really comes down to not comes down to, but it really starts to invigorate this once again. Like, how far do we go? You're talking about, like, even Carrie, you brought that. It's like, how far do we actually go? When do we actually set our own limits? Because once again, we're human. We can't do everything. You know, I like to say to myself that I'm capable of everything as well, but, you know, I got my limits, and we all have our limits. Companies got their limits, and also how much of the moral dilemma will we actually go down? Because if you keep on going down that realm and thinking of every single thing you could do wrong, you actually don't do anything. And we cannot be, and at this point in our climate emergency, we actually don't have the luxury of actually saying, I'm stuck in my thoughts. You know, we got to do something, right? So maybe I can lead in with you guys there. It's like, how do you guys reconcile this? It's like, what limits do you want to put on? Like, what are the small wins that you see starts to be the snowball effect for climate action in your businesses or through your projects?
I find it's about being genuine. So it's the same conversation I have with my kids when they feel overwhelmed about the future and the environment. I don't know what to do. Well, it's about you changing, and you will change your neighbourhood, and it's a knock-on effect. So when I have a conversation with my clients, it's just being honest. And they ask me, so what do you do? Well, to mitigate my conscience, I have a beehive at home. I have chickens. I compost. I grow my own vegetables. And actually, just by being genuine and having those honest conversations about what I'm doing on a personal level, that then leads into what I'm doing on my business, and how that personally I make those small changes, but then that can then have that snowball effect. But if you're not actively making those changes yourself in your personal environment, then you're selling a false promise, and actually change on the personal level before you start expecting your businesses or your clients to do the same.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Amanda. No, seriously, that's absolutely beautiful. Any others want to comment on that?
Yeah, I didn't realise it takes 5 litres of water to make a litre of... 4.74. Right. I don't think it'll make me give up wine, though.
But we don't have to.
No, that's right.
Yes, yeah. I am. I'm positive, Zoom. Yeah.
But I think that you've got to balance. It's like everything is a balance. So you can't just go and, like give up wine because you've discovered it uses 5 litres of water. You have to make all the little changes and have a way of obviously measuring that and focusing on the things that you can actually do something about. So, I led off with one example that where we do something where I can directly impact that, and at the same time accepting that I've chosen a career which is very much involved in using up a lot of natural resources. And so what I say to a lot of my clients is I've decided that if I'm going to build something, it's going to be built to last 100 years. Now that led me down a whole bunch of different paths in, how I've developed myself as a builder. And that means that I know that I'm using some materials that currently can't be recycled or are really high embodied energy, like concrete, for instance. Lots of people go, oh, we want to eliminate concrete in our house. I'm like, okay, I get that you want to do that to reduce your carbon footprint, but if you then build a really high quality house with a properly insulated timber frame that's got vapor permeable membranes on, and that'll last 100 years. So then the carbon footprint of the slab is not as bad once you put it into the ecosystem of you building a house which can stand alone from the energy grid, for instance. So you got to control, you got to have a crack at the things that you can control, and the things that you can't, if you can at least highlight them to clients, and I always use solar panels as an example, then you say, look, on the overall, we're going to build you a really energy efficient house. We're going to do it properly so that your structure stays dry. And there are examples of dry timber buildings that are 100 years old. So there's no reason why a building built today won't last that long if it's done right. So that's kind of how I justify
and
it.
it is also an interesting thing, because if we actually see, this is my understanding, especially through a regenerative lens, is that we can't. Yes, we are the problem in regards to climate change. However, we can also be potentially part of the solution if we choose to. And if we see ourselves as part of the natural cycle, then yes, it does take 5 liters of wine unless you consume Whistling Kite wine, which gives water back to the River Murray. That's why all y'all should commercial plug. That's why y'all should be, getting cases of Whistling Kite wine. However, back on track, if we actually understand ourselves as part of the nature cycles, then we actually know that we take this much. However, we can actually give out this much as well. So I think I know it's a conundrum, and we're all kind of trying to wrestle through it. But once again, do your little bits, right? I love what you said, Jackson. It's like, just have a crack at what you can control, and beautiful statements by Amanda, beautiful statements by Jackson. Who else wants to make the beautiful statement? Because we got to wrap up soon.
I just wanted to say, Jackson, we need to have a conversation about concrete, because you can improve that too.
Okay.
Well, it's not only that. There's so much innovation in building materials. So like, if we ask for innovation, there will be innovation. Like this whole thing, like they say the same thing about solar panels. Will never fucking work. Shut the fuck up. Sorry. Zoom, I'm very sorry if you have kids at home. Shut the fuck up, because at the same time, innovation takes time to commercialize and to scale. And once it scales, well and behold, it's the cheapest form of energy. So that will happen. Like, if we actually hold ourselves accountable in terms of what kind of concrete we procure, we can actually help facilitate more innovation, because these manufacturers in concrete or cement, they will be like, oh shit, all these great architects and engineers, they don't want to specify our product anymore? Change. Sorry, that's my drop the mic moment. Let me do that. No. So that being all said, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news and say we got to wrap up. So I'm very sorry that we have to leave a question on hold. But first of all, I just want to say thank you so much to our panel. If you could join me in giving them a round of applause. Can we also give a round of applause to our Zoom audience, everyone? Because thanks for going on this joyride with us. We wish you were all here, but thank you very much for being here virtually and sticking with our podcast session and then our semi live stream. Look, I always like to end with like a quick, just hot seat question. So please, just 2 more minutes, everyone. I know you need to go. Just down the line, what do you want signatories to be accountable for? Just one thing, one dot point from all of you. What do you want your colleagues in the Declare movement to be accountable for? We'll go down the line. Jackson.
I could do an easy one and just say reducing their carbon footprint.
Cool, that's fine. You can take the easy one. Yeah. Carbon footprint. Measure your carbon footprint.
Implementing carbon zero buildings as an end life.
Zero carbon buildings, embodied and operational. Do it.
Holding clients to account.
Holding clients account. Clients account.
I think if we are declaring, we're spreading the message, so keep promoting and advocating a good message.
Yeah. Speak the good word.
Do you really understand the value of that tree that you're about to chop down?
Stop cutting down the trees. Councils that have declared. Sorry, that's a straight up call out. Yep. We're on you. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of you who not only has stayed with us tonight and going over time. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you all for being here. And I just want to thank you all for your energy because we need it some more. Once again, climate emergency. Let's get shit done. Zoom, thanks for being with us. Y'all can go do your thing. Everyone else, thank you so much. Have a fantastic evening. Stick around if you want, have some conversations. But if you got to go, we understand. Have a great night.